I think that it's tough for a lot of people to get out in weather like this, and I know Doug Ford is. I think Doug Ford is counting on that.
I'm asking those of you who voted NDP in the last election to vote Liberal, to vote for a government that will fix our healthcare system.
Well, Bonnie, what I will tell you, there's a reason why Dr. Jane Philpott, a Liberal minister,
people are living in legislated poverty.
And let me be very clear, Canada may have secured a 30-day pause, but the threat of tariffs loom over us, over our economy. The simple truth is, as long as Donald Trump is president, the risk of tariffs will never go away.
Welcome to this special episode of CP Newswatch. From the National Newsroom of the Canadian Press, I'm Rob Westgate. We're just hours away from Election Day in Ontario. Voters go to the polls on Thursday after Premier Doug Ford called a snap winter election, saying he needs a mandate to deal with 4 years of U.S. President Donald Trump. The three other main party leaders, the Liberals' Bonnie Crombie, NDP leader Marit Stiles, and the Green Party's Mike Schreiner, have all said the election was unnecessary. Still, all four leaders have been crisscrossing Ontario over the past 4 weeks, making their pitch that they are the best person to lead Canada's most populous province. Joining me now to discuss the campaign so far is Canadian Press Queen's Park correspondent Allison Jones. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get right to the core of what many people are wondering. What do you expect to happen Thursday night?
I think it's safe to say that Doug Ford has this in the bag. Every poll out there, they're all consistently saying that he's going to just cruise to another victory, most likely another majority. I think the question marks that still remain to be seen, the things we'll be watching for on election night, are what's going to happen with the NDP and the Liberals. Right now, at dissolution, the NDP was the official opposition, and the Liberals, for the past 2 elections in a row, haven't been able to win enough seats to get official party status. That bar right now is 12 seats. So we're really looking to see what happens with the NDP and Liberals. Those two will really be jockeying for second place, essentially. Will the NDP hang on to their official opposition status, or will the Liberals overtake them? Are the Liberals even going to get enough this time for official party status? And, some pundits, observers are suggesting that Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie might even be in a tough race for her own seat in Mississauga, East Cooksville.
We all know election campaigns are complex and with surprise storylines and issues all the time. How would you summarize the past 4 weeks?
Honestly, with an almost near total absence of surprises, there's this campaign has, I will say, not been the most thrilling, the most surprising I've ever seen. For the most part, it's been Doug Ford talking Trump and tariffs, Bonnie Crombie talking healthcare, Marit Stiles of the NDP talking some healthcare, some affordability. There's some shots they've taken at each other, but nothing really that major. The progressive conservatives have dug up some dirt on some Liberal candidates, some social media posts, a lot of them dating back 10 years or so, though a few more recent. There's some that are homophobic, misogynistic, otherwise problematic, but even that is not really that surprising because the nature of this snap election meant that the NDP and the Liberals in particular were not even close to ready to go in terms of candidates. They both came down pretty close to the wire before they had a full slate. Then they each had one withdraw, so they were both just one short of a full slate. And then Bonnie Crombie had to actually drop another candidate because of one of these controversies. But given the scramble that these parties had to go through to get a lot of these candidates, especially some of them at the last minute, maybe having issues in ridings that are likely not winnable for one or the other, it's really not surprising that there would be, a few questionable, problematic tweets out there for the other parties to find.
Now, on top of that scramble you were mentioning, earlier this week you took a closer look at some of the quirks and difficulties of campaigning during a brutal winter month. Can you walk us through some of your reporting on that?
Yeah, that was a really fun story to pull together with my colleague Liam Casey. We both spoke to a number of candidates, all incumbent candidates who've been in past elections, and they told us some sort of fun and maybe not so fun stories about the quirks of winter campaigning. It's new for most of them because Ontario hasn't had a provincial campaign in the winter since 1981. So most of these people have never been through this before. The traditional lawn signs that you see are not so much lawn signs as snowbank signs. Most of Ontario is in a lot of snow, and so candidates are having to get creative, jamming them in snowbanks, using zip ties to tie them to anything they can. But one candidate told me, you put in a sign and then the next day you come back and it's been covered up because a snowblower went by. So the sign work is just totally futile in some cases. There have been some candidates who have slipped and fallen actually on the ice. There was one who told me that while he was out canvassing, he had to help not one, not two, but 3 different drivers get their cars stuck out of the snow, out of snowbanks. So he posted one video of him and his team pushing a car out. And he said in that one, he actually had to rifle through this guy's recycling with the driver's permission, of course. And he got a bunch of old egg cartons to put under the tires to get some traction to get this guy out. So that's not something that you normally encounter campaigning. But I think Saul Mamakwa probably takes the cake. He's up in Kiiwetinoong, the NDP's incumbent candidate there, and that's in the far northwest of Ontario. And on his riding, there are 24 different fly-in First Nation communities. So he actually has, for a few days of the campaign, rented a plane with skis on it, so he can fly in to some of those communities and still meet the electorate there.
Excellent. Well, you were mentioning earlier a little bit about the drama south of the border and the campaign for Doug Ford heading down to Washington a few times in his role as the chairman of the group of the premiers to try to convince the U.S. government that they shouldn't bring down tariffs on Canada. Do you think, has his Captain Canada push been a factor in this campaign or in an outcome for the province?
I think for the Progressive Conservatives, it's been the main factor. I think it was one of the deciding factors in Doug Ford deciding to call this election. And I think the polls would suggest that voters are responding to his, as people have dubbed it, his Captain Canada approach. He really has been at the forefront of this fight that is on a lot of people's minds in Ontario, in Canada. And because of the political turmoil in Ottawa, Doug Ford has really been, not so much one of the Canadian leaders out front and center, but really the only one, save for a little bit of finagling by Danielle Smith, who went down to Mar-a-Lago. But, Doug Ford has been so front and center on this, and I think it's only helping his campaign. I think voters are responding to it. Certainly he thinks that. That's been pretty much the only thing he's talked about this whole campaign. There have been a couple other unrelated policy announcements here and there, but for the most part, pretty much every day he has talked about Trump, tariffs, and the threat that they pose to Ontario's economy. Even in the debates, he would be asked about healthcare or housing, and he'd pivot back to tariffs, saying, look, there's not going to be enough money in the economy to pay for healthcare if these tariffs come and devastate the economy. So he has made it the central, if not really the only plank of his campaign. The other parties, the Greens, the NDP, the Liberals, have tried to criticize him for this approach of going down to Washington. He's made 2 separate trips there, and he was doing that sort of while wearing the premier hat, even though it's the middle of a provincial campaign. They say that has violated this principle of the caretaker convention, and he shouldn't be using these trips that he's making as premier to campaign. We saw him actually do that. His party posted a video montage of clips of Ford in Washington, and then slapped the PC party logo on the end. But then when the other parties said, this is exactly what the integrity commissioner told you not to do, they pretty quickly removed that video, scrubbed it of the logo. But I don't think that, questions about him violating the caretaker convention are necessarily going to be the ballot question.
Now, looking ahead, in the last provincial election, the leaders of the Liberal Party and the NDP, they stepped down after losing to Doug Ford and the PCs. Is there a chance that we could see more leaders stepping down after this election?
I think there is a chance. We are alive to that possibility, certainly. When it comes to the NDP, if they lose official opposition status, I have to think that that's a consideration that Marit Stiles will have to make, perhaps on election night. I don't know what kind of pressure she is getting from her team, from the other candidates, from the caucus members, but certainly that will be a question if they lose official opposition status, if they come in third. As for the Liberals, as I mentioned earlier, there is the chance that Bonnie Crombie might not win her own seat. The Progressive Conservatives are doing their best to make sure she doesn't. Doug Ford is actually spending some time in the riding Bonnie Crombie is running in on his very last day of the campaign, which I think really shows how they're trying hard to keep Bonnie Crombie out of the legislature. So I think if she doesn't win her own seat, that could make it tricky to stay on. But also if the Liberals fail for a third time to get official party status, I think then that's also going to have to be a question that weighs pretty heavily on her on election night.
Just to wrap things up, what do you expect the tone will be this Friday at Queen's Park, or will it just be back to business?
Well, I hope they take Friday off, to be honest. I hope they give a bit of a down day for everyone. But, I've been talking to some of the Progressive Conservatives, and I think they will want to hit the ground running pretty quickly, assuming they do win. They had been doing budget preparations before the election was called, so they likely have a lot of that work done already. They'll want to introduce a budget fairly quickly, and they'll want to have all their ducks in a row, given the impending tariff threat from Donald Trump that could come in very soon. So I think they want to be, back in session, name a cabinet. I think all that stuff will happen fairly quickly.
Well, we'll be watching, and the Canadian Press will have coverage throughout the election night as results roll in, and of course in the days and weeks to come. Thanks for joining me, Allison.
Thank you, Rob.
I'm newscaster Rob Westgate.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. For more of today's top stories, visit thecanadianpressnews.ca.